And although we don't have members of the public currently online or in the building, I will welcome them in case some decide to join at some point, welcoming members that are here this morning and the officers that are intended to support the meeting, and many of them who sit on the Constitution Officer Working Group. So I'm going to move on to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence, is Councillor Rathbone. I have not received any apologies for lateness or...
I think Councillor Gordon said she couldn't come.
Okay, so apologies also from Councillor Gordon. Thank you. Number 2, any declarations of interest from members? No declarations of interest? Okay, then moving on to item 3. Cheers. I would like the committee to agree the minutes of the Constitution on the 29th of March 2023 as accurate and recording of the proceedings. So agreed. So I will move on to one of the matters arising, which was on actions 1 to 3. And then if we look at item, I don't know if you remember in item action 4 that we wanted officers to discuss under appendix 4, the elected mayor and councillor section, and standing orders relating to holding of office. Were there any updates?
We've emailed member services. Oh no, sorry, that's the first one. That one, the officer working group are still working on that, so it's still outstanding.
Yeah.
And we'll be updating at a future meeting on that again.
I suggest that you update by email, and then at the next meeting when it's raised under matter it's arrived, and then if members choose to ask anything additional to the update in the email, it can be done there rather than it being an item at the next meeting. And my understanding with action 5 that we wanted officers to recirculate the information to members around data control, and my understanding is that you've gone back to member services for that email to be sent out. So again, when that's done, we can be updated via email. Okay, so moving on to item 4, which is the Constitution review. And just to recap that after a meeting with myself and Councillor Gordon as the Vice Chair and officers, we decided to move away from the page turn approach. I mean, in effect, because all councillors are reading the information cover to cover from back to front, we are in effect still doing the page turn. We are just not doing it collectively. So that will reassure anyone that is watching back. But we felt like the time used together is better in hearing from officers and indeed councillors raising questions, queries, or making suggestions rather than physically turning through every page, which we all do in the comfort of our homes or within the council where we're going through the papers. So just with that revisit, I'm going to hand over to Dawn now for your introduction to this piece.
Thank you to Chair. Thank you so much. So just for everyone's information today, I'd just like to confirm that work is continuing on the remaining sections of the Constitution with officers. The primary focus of the group has been on those sections which are presented to committee this morning, which we are hoping that colleagues around the table will be able to have a discussion on today. Officers have also been working on the comments and the suggested amendments that were given at the last meeting, and we have also received some via email as well. And once those are completed and we've gone through all of them, we're doing it on a comment by comment basis, and in fact officers are doing the page turn. So once all of those comments have been addressed and suggested amendments have been incorporated or not incorporated, but a suggestion as to why they haven't been incorporated or provided, then we will refer that information back to the Constitution Committee. So we are still working on the timeline of attending a July 2023 meeting for adoption of the Constitution. As I have assured colleagues and also assured Deputy Mayor Bramble, we will ensure that as officers we complete all of the necessary changes that are needed so that we can get to a July 2023 council meeting for adoption of the amended and updated and newly redrafted Constitution. So just a further update on the public engagement in June. We have been working with the consultation and engagement team. We have fed back to them the comments that were made at the last meeting, and the engagement plan is shared with everyone as an appendix at Appendix 10. So I'm not sure if there are any questions or any observations that colleagues would either colleagues from myself in terms of officers or members would like to make with regards to the engagement plan, but that is at Appendix 10. Thank you.
I mean, I've got a few very small comments on
Yeah,
other stuff. So, but going to the engagement plan.
Yeah.
I think a lot of information could come from people who are currently engaged in the decision-making process, you know, like lay members of the scrutiny commissions and stuff like that. So I think possibly to call a focus group specifically of them to look at the relevant part of the Constitution,
Yes, yeah.
might prove quite beneficial.
Yes, yeah.
Rather than, I know that Hackney Matters, you know, engages a wide range of people.
Yes, yeah.
But they're not necessarily people who are interested in this. So they are an interested party that I think, you know, we could benefit from their insight.
Yes, yeah.
We did also mention, I think last time, engaging people who've engaged with the process before, so petitioners,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
other campaign groups who have already engaged with the Constitution.
Yes.
I think those are good reminders,
Those are
aren't they?
good, yes,
Because you and I have always been keen to ensure that we have a reference through, because actually that validates what we think we're doing to improve the engagement. Ultimately, the whole reason why I decided to have this meeting and bring it public and you set up this forum is that we wanted to ensure that what we were doing around the Constitution was transparent, but also ultimately to hopefully increase the engagement from the public. Really, we want to make sure that we explain what we do and then we inform people how to get in contact with us to hopefully increase engagement. But equally, I think you're right. The focus groups that you mentioned, Councillor, is key, and people that have brought deputations and questions to us are absolutely people that we need to contact. So I think that would be good. You know, we might want some additional focus groups as well and touch organisations that haven't approached us to say, well, what would it take for you to engage with us? But I think those suggestions by both of my colleagues, I think are really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can take that forward as well. So we're meeting again with the consultation and engagement team mid next week. So we will feed that back to them. And I think it's an excellent point, Councillor Binnie Lubbock, especially with regards to petitioners, because, you know, we want the Constitution to be a document that if our members of the public, residents, want to be able to they want to know how the council works, how can they be involved, how can they raise a deputation and petition, and it's about making that as easy as possible and accessible as possible.
I think one group of people that I'd like to see us include in this as well is tenants and residents associations.
Yes,
When I think of them and what they do, they're like the hub and in the heart of the community. I think we should reach out to them. And maybe the organisations where I think there's some bodies where they elect members or representatives from each of the tenants and residents associations to a broader housing board. So I just think they would be good as well. We could. Yeah, that's right.
We can include in that ward forums as well, any that are coming up, you know.
Yeah, that's a very good.
Try and recruit people for focus groups.
Yeah,
absolutely.
From those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a good place for recruitment. I don't know if it'll necessarily be the better place to discuss it, because
Oh, no. So in terms of recruiting and inviting them to the focus groups, I think that would be excellent. Yeah, because at least that's where you're targeting those people who are engaged and want their voices to be heard. So thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. So if we, with the chair's permission, if we move on to Appendix 1, which is, so I'm not sure how you'd like us to do it today, the chair. I'm happy to take questions on all of the appendices and to talk through them if members would like me to. So for example, with regards to Appendix 1, this is really the setting out for members today the working draft, which has the format and the way in which the constitution will be set out. It's the constitution draft index, and I'm not sure if members have any questions with regards to how that is presented. So essentially, it just sets out, this is how at the very start of the constitution, this is what after the glossary, this is what members of the public and officers and members will see.
I mean, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
thank you. And members are happy with the glossary. I think we confirmed at the last meeting that
Yes,
we were happy
we
with the
were
glossary
happy.
going at the start, because at least that way it's easier for anyone using the constitution to just know that it's there and an easy refer to.
I think it's something that we need to continuously update anyway.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. Yes, and it's that's a good point, and it's putting a mechanism in place that anytime it's updated and new languages is used, that it's always updated. But I don't know what your framework for officers, or I don't know what you're putting in place to ensure that happens, because it'd be quite easy for it to be updated and there be an acronym and not being in place. So some kind of, I don't know if a tracker or a checklist, something needs to be put in place to support officers in that.
Yes. So with regards to any changes that are made to the constitution, either in year or that are made prior to a full report going to council, we do have a tracker. So every amendment that's made, because we need, as a monitoring officer, I need to be able to answer any individual that says to me, oh, there was a change made, why did you make that change? But we do have a tracker which sets out and enables us to be able to record all changes that are made. Thank you.
Welcome, Councillor Gordon. And okay, that's good. So, and in the process of that tracker, people checking that acronyms are spelt out. And
Yes, definitely. Yes,
thank you.
Because that's also part of the plain English approach that we're taking with the constitution as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, could I just say, with regards to the use of acronyms, do you think there's any like the first time in a section that then I suppose it's going to be different, maybe links to the glossary or links to the acronym?
Yes, that
ideally. I know that, or at least perhaps the first time an acronym is used in a section, if it could be linked to the explanation in the glossary. I think, that's, we're talking about the online version.
That's right. That's what I was thinking. I think you'd really have to do that, isn't it? So the first time you mention it, it's in full, and then you have the acronym near it.
The link is there to the relevant bit in the glossary, even if it's not in full.
But I think what you'd want the whole title out in full, then the acronym beside it, but then the link to the explanation in either the word or the acronym, because once you've explained it once, and then you can use the acronym. But I mean, ideally, I don't know, now this is beyond my IT remit, but I don't know if every time you have that acronym you can constantly have the link, so people don't always have to look back the first time the acronym's there. So ideally, every time there's an acronym, there should be a link. But the first time you see an acronym, it should only be after the word's been laid out in full.
Yes, because that's the standard way that's what in terms of reports, that's what we would normally do. You'd use the full wording, then the acronym. And usual practice is that throughout any report, or for example through the constitution, you would then continue with the acronym. But that's a really good point and something that we can discuss, because it might be that we won't want to use acronyms at all, really, depending, because, you know, I sometimes, even myself, reading through a document, if you go a bit further on and you think, oh, what was that again? Sometimes it can be a bit confusing. So that's something that we can discuss at the Officer Working Group, and see how we can best facilitate that. You're right, the ICT involvement with regards to such changes and implementations is really important.
I think so, and possibly myself and you and Councillor Gordon as vice chair should have a meeting with ICT just to ensure that everything that we need to make this more accessible is doable in the time. Now, I know we've had those conversations, but it might just be good to have a touch base on that.
Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you.
That's helpful.
Thank you. Okay, if we're happy, I'll move to Appendix 2.
Yes.
So Appendix 2 relates to Part 4, Section C, the Budget and Policy Framework Procedure. The rules, again, have been the subject of review by the Constitution Working Group and also colleagues from Finance. In fact, we needed finance colleagues to make sure that they were happy with any amendments. So amendments to these rules have been made to ensure that the council's decision making is compliant with legislation. As a consequence, these amendments, which appear in paragraph 2.1F onwards, are not something which, as a matter of principle, this committee may seek to amend, because they, as I said, we need to make sure that this section is the whole of the Constitution, but in particular, the finance rules are compliant with legislation. So really, this is for noting, but if there are any questions that members have, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions or comments? So I'll start with Councillor Gordon and work my way down to everyone.
Yeah, I don't think, a couple of comments from me. I think firstly, I think as a principle, it's quite sort of useful to have a link to the underlying legislation, so terms are perfectly clear. You know, what the interest of origin of these, you know, these procedure rules are. My second sort of overarching comment really was in relation to input for scrutiny. I think it's really important that the sort of, you know, independence, separateness and scrutiny function is sort of made clear here as well. Because this is a sort of slight departure really about sort of, you know, the possibility of Cabinet proactively seeking advice from the Scrutiny Commission on proposals. So you know, I do have some concerns about the sort of blurring of the lines really. I think it probably doesn't go over that line, but I think it just needs to be sort of quite clear that the, you know, the scrutiny is sort of independent.
So a sentence which says,
yeah,
which goes to the impartiality of the scrutiny,
of scrutiny, yes, yeah. So
okay, so we,
you know, I think scrutiny is a separate function from the executive. So
yeah. So so we would look, I think, in order to include that, we would have to look to include that quite earlier on in this. So in either paragraph B or C. So in fact, maybe the first sentence at the end of paragraph B.
Yeah.
You could possibly think. Would you be happy to provide some wording that you think, Councillor Gordon, you would like?
Yeah, no, I'm happy about it if other people are sort of happy with that. I think there should also be a link here to the, you know, in terms of sort of what we're just saying about links in terms of the other scrutiny functions as well. So
right,
I know what scrutiny commission is as well. So for anyone just sort of coming to this fresh, so they know what scrutiny is.
Right. Okay. That's something we can take forward and have a discussion on, definitely.
Somewhat similarly, in terms of linking to like glossary and things like that, some of the terms in this sort of financial terms be that accessible to people. Like I didn't have to look up what the environment was. And
right. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
To later on.
Yeah.
In the document as well.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it would be useful to include that as in the glossary and just some of the words are a bit technical specific.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Troughton.
Yeah, mine was a similar comment about the term in principle decision. I know that's a, you know, a term that's commonly used, but in local government circles, but is it something that members of the public would necessarily understand? So again, a way to either word that in a way that is different and more understandable, or put a link to a glossary.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
An explanation of
Yeah.
what that means actually in paragraph F would be so nice.
Councillor Gordon?
But just on, you know, on a positive note, I actually do welcome these, you know, this being set out in detail in the constitution. I think it's really helpful
Yeah, yeah.
for, you know, everyone's understanding of these processes,
Yeah.
you know, clarity and transparency. So I do welcome that.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. So if we can move on to Appendix 3, which is page 29 to 62. Again, this relates to the financial procedure rules. Some minor amendments have been made by finance colleagues, but these do not affect the overall scope or approach to the existing rules. They were minor, as the council must ensure that its financial administration is compliant with legislations. Again, we can't go to, the committee and also the working group can't change the essence and the actual wording, but if there are further comments that need to be made in terms of clarification, again, we're happy to take your thoughts on that today. But just to confirm again that finance colleagues have provided us with their comments on and suggested amendments.
This is very good.
Very good.
It's really helpful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's really helpful for everyone's understanding.
I think the only thing that might add value for those people that are quite interested in finance or are curious when we're talking about it is the links to the Act. So where we're mentioning, we're referencing section 1114. I think if people want further understanding around that, I think a link to that would add value. But other than that, I think the colleagues have said, I think this is set out really well, and just feedback back to Ian and his team.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
So if there are no further comments on agenda on the Appendix 3, should we move on to 4?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you for that. So again, these rules have been the subject of review by colleagues from the procurement service to ensure that they remain appropriate and consistent with the council's practice. In addition, references to EU legislation have been removed as a result of, you know, we're no longer in Brexit, so, no longer in the EU. So all references to EU legislation have been removed. Again, because the council must assure that its approach to procurement is compliant with legislation, the rules are not something which the committee and also officers, as a matter of principle, can seek to amend. But the committee also would like to just confirm to the committee today that the standing orders will need to be reviewed once the procurement bill, which is at the report stage in the House of Commons, is enacted and brought into enforce to ensure that our standing orders are compliant. So I'm not sure if members have any comments.
Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, just really actually, sorry, it's not on this, but I mean, do you have any timescales for procurement bill, and can you give an idea what the changes are going to be?
So it's at the report stage, and so I think it still has to go, if my memory serves me correct, when I last looked, it still has to go to the House of Lords and then go back to the House of Commons. So I think that's going to be at least another 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's going to be brought into force.
And then it'll be brought into force, yeah.
It's not,
So it's not imminent.
Yeah.
In terms
It's
of
going to be
change.
starting from, you know, next financial year.
I would think so, yes, yeah. But we can update. So if we can look that up and we can update the committee with regards to.
Do you know what sort of changes there? Are they anything substantial in terms of this?
So I unfortunately I'm not sure of the depth of the changes. Only just to say that because of the requirement to remove a lot of the provisions which were EU provisions, it does seem that it will be a whole scale change. How this affects the current practice remains to be seen. So what we can do is do maybe an A4 side, a briefing note to members of the committee just to show what the proposed changes will be, and also the impact that it could have on our rules as on our standing orders as they currently are.
Yeah, obviously the EU rules will be sunsetted automatically unless they're
Exactly,
yeah,
yes,
at the end of so
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd be quite interested anyway. I don't know whether other people are. So yeah, so
Yeah.
thank you. Yes, and I
yeah.
don't want to give you extra work.
No. It is something that we are doing. And what I can do is ask our senior procurement lawyer. He's been drafting briefing notes for procurement colleagues anyway. So I can ask him just to kind of assimilate everything that he's got into something quite succinct so that we can share that with colleagues.
And I think Rotimi can help with that as well, because I
Yes.
sit on the insourcing and procurement committee,
Yeah.
and a lot of that detail is there
Yes.
to access, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it can all be pulled together. I think as well, with every section of the Constitution, if we make the assumption that someone that goes to that part of the Constitution, that might be their first time in accessing it and they won't access it in order, it's really important that we get those links. So if you've been in a document before, you may understand what the term standing orders is. If you only go to this part, you need a hyperlink. So I know it might be over hyperlink sensitive, but we've got to make the assumption that people might access the first point of interest.
Yeah.
And if they haven't accessed the rest of the document, it wouldn't have been explained before.
Yes.
So every section will have to
Like
sit
a
down.
reverse index.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just and again, while I'm talking about things slightly on the scope of this committee, I think it would be very, very useful to have a programme of training for members on this, on the detail of the new rules, the financial and procurement rules, particularly in relation to our budget scrutiny functions as well, because they'll obviously sort of be under, and our separate functions and audit, which Councillor Trapp and I are involved in both. So yeah.
I think that'd be useful.
Yeah. I mean, I think in essence, what we do know is that the procurement bill is looking to repeal the EU-based procurement regulations. What that means in its greater sense, though, is something that we will need to. I'll need to get my procurement colleagues to kind of provide the details on.
Any more comments on Appendix 4? Okay, so let's move on to Appendix 5.
Thank you so much. So Appendix 5 is a new section, Part 8. It's as titled proper Section 8A with regards to proper officer functions, roles and functions. And just for clarity, a proper officer is an officer appointed by the council to carry out certain administrative functions as required by statute. For example, receiving or giving notices, certifying or authenticating documents, keeping registers, and issuing summonses for meetings. This section of the Constitution, it lists those functions and identifies the officer who is responsible. So the proposed changes will be to reformat the table of functions so that the applicable acts or the regulations appear in the same row as the functions. Previously, how it was, subheadings were used for each piece of legislation, which would result in the reader having to scroll back and forth. Also, to update the titles of various officers to reflect current names, because, with the more recent changes in terms of job titles, that needs to be done as well. And then also to provide the chief executive, the chief executive will be the proper officer in respect of any statutory provisions which either have not yet been the subject of proper allocation, as it were, or which may come into force in the future. And so, and the reason why we've arrived at that decision is because it's considered necessary to protect the council's interest. So if there's not a specified person or role, then we've agreed, or what we've suggested, what we would like to suggest is agreed, is that the chief executive will then be the proper officer and person responsible for that.
Yeah.
I just have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
On page 96, it talks about the chairperson of the council. Isn't that the same as the speaker?
Page
7,
96.
sorry. The chairperson of the council.
What number is, so can you go,
7, sorry.
number 7, sorry, sorry, the officer by whom meeting of the council. On screen, the officer by whom a meeting of the council, so they can.
Are you
Yes, I think that would relate to the.
Are you talking about in the supplementary or in the main document?
In the main
Councillor?
document.
Are you
in the main
talking
document,
about in
yeah.
the main
So
document?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, in the main document.
And what page are you referring to in the main document, Councillor?
97.
Page 96, yeah.
Yeah, it's
I think it's different in the supplementary, so.
Yes, yes. So if I can just, whilst I'm just looking that up, I think what also members have before them today is a supplementary document which has the same proper officer functions, roles and functions, but in a different way. So, but just to go to Councillor Binny Lubbock's question, I believe it is, but I don't want to get that wrong. So, let me go.
I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of the supplementary agenda. Is there any spare ones?
We've used all our spares.
Sorry, yeah.
No,
I
that's
don't
okay.
want to share with them.
Yeah, just because on number 4 we talk about
Yeah.
the speaker or deputy speaker.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
I mean, if that's a statutory name that needs to be
Yeah.
thinking more. The other thing I was going to ask is on page 104, we've got some missing roles, some gaps, and I was just wondering what. So on page 104, 44, there's no function exercised by, and
Yes, yeah.
the same with number 40.
Meeting and exit, yeah. So those, yes, so those we need to just to confirm. Yeah, we hadn't as yet confirmed who the proper officers would be for those. In the absence of us being able to confirm, then it would revert back to the chief executive. Yeah, but thank you. Yes, yeah.
No, again, it's helpful and transparent.
So I'm not sure if officers have had a chance to look at the supplementary, is yet and to see the change, the suggested changes. Natalie, do you just want to quickly explain changes? Yeah,
I can.
okay, yeah.
Sorry, and so the suggested change in the supplementary relates to the fact that there are 2 approaches that council have taken where they list the proper functions. One is to list them by proper functions in a chronological order as and when the legislation came in. The other was where you list the title of the job and the combination of functions underneath them. So the supplementary combines both those approaches. So keeping the functions separate, because I think our feeling was, if you're a member of public and you're trying to find out who the officer responsible for an action is, you're going to be looking for the function, not looking for the job title.
Yeah.
But we've also grouped them by job titles. So they go chief executive and then the group director of finance. So you can see, so it's kind of combining 2 in a way that we thought might be easy to understand if you're coming from either approach.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. That's really helpful. Thank you for that, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks. So, Councillor Binny Lubbock, can I come back to you with regards to the section number 7, just to confirm who that's referring to? And we'll just do a quick cross-reference with the legislation and.
Tessa, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just to also mention that the officer group who've been looking at the proper officer functions and the format and the layout and things like that, and whilst it's great and really helpful for transparency, there actually isn't a requirement to include it in the Constitution, and a number of councils have moved away from including it. So I just wanted to share that with you as well, so that you're aware. And there's also been some recent guidance shared by the Centre of Governing and Scrutiny that can speak to that. So if it's helpful, informally, we can share that with you so that you can see the background to it as you consider as we consider the newer versions of the constitution as they come forward.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So I didn't quite understand. So that this is not included in other constitutions.
There are some local authorities do and some don't.
Some don't, yeah.
Yeah.
But there was guidance to say that it's better.
It's better to, yeah.
And I think it strengthens the argument of why we thought and started this, that transparency is key, and the more information that we give people is the better. Councillor Charlton?
I mean, I think it's a really good idea to do this, double cross-check version. But is there also a case for introducing the list by legislation, by act, statute? So Local Government Act and the various functions listed in there. Would that help people, do you think?
Do you? Yeah.
Well, I think our view was really who is the end user of the document, and I think you're more likely. I suppose our feeling was if you have one document that helps people find out either what someone does or who is responsible for the particular area I'm interested in, that will then indicate the legislation and it's available there for you to look. I think having two documents, one that lays out the functions in a hopefully usable way, and the legislation that is the background to it, I think might confuse more people than it would assist. I think that was our view. It's like we're trying to get who uses it, the majority of people who will be using this, and what's the best way of displaying the information. I think for most people, the legislation probably is less relevant than who's responsible for whatever it might be. Yeah.
Or maybe it's something we could put to the focus group.
Yes, yeah.
Any interest in it?
Yeah.
Good idea. Any more comments or contributions on Appendix 5? That was all very helpful, thank you. We'll move on to Appendix 6 then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So Appendix 6 will be in Part 8 and Section B, and this is the officer employment rules. For information, the Council Officer Employment Rules gives effect to the legislative provisions of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989 and other statutory provisions around the employment, discipline and dismissal of council employees. These also include the statutory safeguards afforded to the Head of Paid Services, who is the Chief Executive, Section 151 officer, who is our Group Director for Finance, and also the Monitoring Officer, who in the London Borough of Hackney is the Director of Legal. So the rules have been the subject of review by the Director of HR and OD. So she has had the opportunity to look at these.
HR, Human Resources.
Oh, sorry, yes, Human Resources and Organisational Development. Yes, thank you so much, definitely. And also our council's employment lawyers have also reviewed the rules to ensure that they remain compliant with legislative requirements also. So I'm not sure if there are any questions. Again, because the rules are significantly based around and are reflective of legislative requirements, they're not open for change in principle. As a matter of principle, we wouldn't seek to amend them, but if there's anything around clarification or style, we'll be happy to take comments and thoughts on that as well. Thank you.
Clarification questions.
Sure, yeah.
On page 114, section 8.1, it says what happens if a objection received is not material or not well-founded. But it doesn't say what would happen if it was well-founded.
Okay, so all right, you're right, but because if it is well-founded, then we would have to the process. Yeah. So
I was also wondering if, in terms of notification of who's notified about an appointment, so that they could raise an objection. And it looks like I think it's just cabinet and the mayor. Is it possible for other group leaders to be notified as well, just to see if there's a wider input that can be given, or if anyone has any concerns or anything that they could raise them at that point?
Yeah. So currently, the appointments committee has a membership of majority group and then one opposition member who currently is Councillor Steinberg, so who has been appointed by the Conservative group. And my understanding is that going forward that will remain as well, because as you will be aware, it relates to the numbers that we have in terms of opposition groups. That's a point that we can consider, and that's something that we can look at, and also then maybe have a conversation with the mayor, because he is currently the chair of the appointments committee. So that's a conversation a question that we can take to him as to his thoughts on that as well. Yeah.
On a similar sort of point, on page 115, 9.3, talking about assistance to political groups.
Yeah.
It's not clear which political groups are eligible. Is there another?
Yes. So that's the appointment of assistance to political shall be made in accordance with the wishes of that political group. There is an additional.
Councillor, can you just say what?
Sorry, that's
point in the
9.3 on
9.3?
Yeah, 115.
I don't think that there is another reference to it, although my memory seems to be telling me that there is. We'll have a look at that and come back to you.
On 10.6, it mentions the relevant officer, and I assume that means the relevant officer as in the person who's being, who has a allegation raised by them. Probably if relevant officer is clear enough, maybe that's just in my reading of it. Makes it sound, so this is in 10.6.
Yes, that should be, because that's the person against whom in question. Yes,
I don't know if relevant officer, because you could have different layers of relevancy. And 10.9, page 116, it says that the investigator can ask any member of council staff. I'm wondering, does that include members?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because this works on the basis that the relevant person who is subject to the disciplinary or investigation, the complaint would have stemmed from an employee. That's the principle upon which this is based. So it's almost, there's been a complaint that has been raised against a senior officer by a member of staff, and so therefore that's why the provision is for those members of staff to be able to. But
an allegation could also be raised by a member.
Well, yes.
Or they could have evidence that might
That could, investigation. Yes. So we can, I think that's a very good point. So we can look to see how we can include that. Yeah.
My final question was around page 117, 11.8, about the full council considering the recommendation of the independent panel. Is that a public full council meeting?
Yes, it would be. Yeah. It would be, although parts of it could be exempt depending on the allegation, depending on the content. Yeah. But in principle, yes, it would be. Yes. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Let's move on to appendices 7 then. Thank you, Dawn.
Okay, thank you. So appendix 7, as we will be part 9, codes and protocols for the elected mayor and councillors and officer relations. For everyone's information, the council's protocol on the elected mayor and councillor and officer relations is designed to promote the highest standards in public life and harmonious working relationships between our elected politicians and elected officials and officers, whilst recognizing the varied and complex relationships that exist in that. The existing protocol has been the subject of a review and refresh to provide greater clarity and understanding, not only for elected members and officers, but also by those who would wish to understand how the relationship operates. The substantive revisions include the summary table at the beginning of the document, and also a new section entitled The Relationship, which has general points. Redrafting of the sections around the role and expectations for both members and officers, including the use of bullet list, and then an update to the publicity and press releases section to refer to the code of recommended practice on local authority publicity, and also an update to the correspondence section to reflect that letters are not the sole means of communication, and many formal communications now occur via email. And finally, the collation of the mechanisms for dealing with any issues into one section.
I feel like those additions are welcome, and talking about the relationship and the expectations and making that clear for everyone is really good, because I feel like going into politics, my reflection, it feels a bit like learning a language for the first time, and you go into that classroom and the teacher's speaking in that new language and you don't have access to it. So actually, I think the explanations here make it just a lot more accessible, and people have a better understanding of what we do and what it looks like. So I welcome that. Thank you.
It kind of made me think that it would be good to have a briefing for new councillors, which pull out the parts of the constitution which are especially relevant for them to get up to speed on when they first start. And maybe there's different views of the index of the content page for members of the public, for councillors, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Charlton?
I just had a couple of comments on the wording in page 121, the columns set out there. I mean, there may be reasons why, we prefer this language, but I thought the first point, elected mayor and councillors, my preferred language would be democratically elected representatives who set the council's policies, rather, because I just think strategic direction, there is an element, in a way it's a bit difficult because, because we do have an executive that actually does set sort of strategic direction, and it's difficult to group in just one phrase, the role of the executive and the backbench members. I appreciate that, maybe that's why it's worded that way, but I just think that talking about representatives is a more let's say accessible language for members of the public. So policies is also more understandable for members of the public. And then in the next section, the third one down, consider the advice from professional officers. I think the professional should come after consider the professional advice
from officers. Yeah. That's very good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So if we can go back to your first point. So democratically elected representatives to replace politicians. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Who set the council strategic?
Colleagues agree with that.
So it's in a sense, it's simplifying it and making it more accessible.
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe my colleagues disagree. It's just
not sure we need the
democratically. Yeah.
I think that's implicit in elected. So
yeah.
I hope it is anyway.
Yeah.
To say elected representatives.
Yeah.
And then who set the council's policies.
Yeah.
Because I think strategic direction does contain an element of operational responsibility, which the cabinet does have, but backbench members don't have. But what we all have is input into policy. So I don't know.
Yeah. Policies. Okay, yeah, something for consideration.
Yes.
Thank you, definitely. And then I very much do take on board the second comment, consider the professional advice from officers. I think that's really good, yeah. So we'll
and then
do
there
that.
is a misspelling in 2.1, line 6, councillors, there's only one L there, which is one spelling of the name, but it's good to be consistent, probably since sharp on the spell check.
Yes, yeah, thank
There's
you.
one other
Oh, yes,
typo.
yeah, I saw that one, yeah.
On 121, on the accountability section, it says, understand the constraints, the elected mayor should be that, but the elected mayor should, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Understand the constraints. Oh, yes, thank you, yeah, we've got yes, yeah, so that should be that, yeah.
I had one other question on page 125, 5.1F. I guess best value reviews and best value performance would also be linked within the glossary.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what those are.
Yeah.
And same for a bit later, you know, linking back to where it says bias and just making
Yes,
it clear
yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Any more comments on questions on Appendix 7? Let's move on to Appendix 8. I'll come back to you, Dawn.
Thank you. 8. So Appendix 8 again in Part 9, codes and protocols on the governance of the council's interest in companies. So it's essential from a good governance perspective that the council needs to ensure the right balance between the needs of any local authority trading companies with regards to their ability to have the right tools to enable them to be successful, whilst also acknowledging the need for democratic accountability as well. A commitment to the council's goals and compliance with the council's organisational systems. It's really important. And I think if we look around the country where local authorities have gone, you know, into special measures, at the heart of a number of those local authorities have been failed companies, or, you know, company endeavours that have taken them into deep waters, as it were. So it is proposed that in addition to the internal documentation which exists around the establishment of such alternative delivery vehicles, the council adopts a protocol which details the high-level governance arrangements that will apply in these instances. The protocol is derived from a model protocol which has been issued by lawyers in local government, with appropriate amendments to reflect the council's current practice. The protocol has been drafted in consultation with the Section 151 officer, so our Group Director of Finance, who acts as the council's intelligent shareholder for any companies established by the council. So, you know, we've had a number of discussions with him and he has approved and signed off this protocol.
Any questions?
I think it's excellent.
It reads really well.
I had one question, which was 6.3 on page 137. The council has designated the Group Director of Finance and Corporate Resources to be the intelligent shareholder for all council-owned and controlled companies. Is that a fixed thing that should be in the constitution, or is it that the council will designate who that is? I'm just wondering, because it feels like that's, if we put it in the constitution, that's kind of locking that role in as that for that position.
Yes. So the inclusion of it in the constitution, it reflects what we have in the working protocol. So which governs the governance arrangements for how we set up companies, council-owned companies. So it was felt that it should be reflected in the constitution, and that role has been designated as the Section 151 officer, and also, I believe, written into the job description for the 151 officer as well. And it was felt that that would be the most appropriate person to hold that role because of the nature of the role, the fact that they are the finance person, the person responsible for the council's finances. Yeah.
Putting it in the constitution makes it appear as if it's kind of constitutionally fixed rather than decided by the council, or you know what the protocols are for if that needed to change, or those other kind of questions that come along with it being in there.
Yeah, I mean, something we can consider, and maybe what we can do is we can, in order to address that, is expand on that sentence, but add an additional sentence which links this designation back to the protocol. Yeah, for clarity. I think that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah. sorry, Chair. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's really, really helpful to have this set out in the Constitution. It's really, I mean, I wonder, I do think this is, I don't actually sort of off the top of my head have any sort of particular suggestions. I do think this is still quite difficult for a member of the public to sort of access and sort of understand these structures work. I think actually, I don't know whether you'd thought of a sort of diagrammatic sort of, you know, a picture to tell a story sort of, you know, things sort of, maybe just sort of, I don't know, with narrows really about the sort of relationship between the council and the companies. I think it's, I mean, we've only got a limited number of these. I think maybe we could just list them as well in the Constitution. It wouldn't, we're not going to sort of be, I don't think there's any sort of, we're not going to be opening up a new one every week, are we? So just, so I think it might be useful just to sort of, for clarity, to sort of link to,
I think
what we're talking about and what their functions are as well. So
I think we can consider that. I think my preference would be to have a sentence which directs the reader to a page on the council's website, which would say you can find a list of council's companies.
And their functions,
because it would mean, in a sense, that if we were to seek to close down a company, we'd have to amend the Constitution, or to start a new one, we would then have to amend the Constitution again, which again, it's not onerous to do so. But I think maybe if we could have a sentence which says a full list of, but that's something we can consider.
I think a diagrammatic summary.
But I like the diagrammatic. Just on a single page.
I think that there's an opportunity because our communications team, I nearly said comms, but reminding myself, our communication team should be part of this as well. And they've worked really well using infographics for lots of different things that we wanted to communicate with the community. So the Constitution shouldn't be outside of that. So I'm sure that's something that you can support us with.
Yeah, and in particular, the sort of 151 officer is obviously got sort of, you know, different hats really here as well as as a member, the responsible member. I think it'd be useful to sort of, you know, direct the public to that as well. You know, as well as any sort of underlying guarantee fund. Well, I think that's probably what you were getting at earlier, really, about down. So it's just, I think it's important that the public understands those relationships.
I suppose taking the lead from my vice chair that's saying things outside of the remit, I think that we need to consider the name of member services, because we keep referring to us as elected representatives and calling ourselves councillors, but the very body that we go to for support isn't called councillor support. And when the public have queries, they don't phone up to speak to someone that works and support councillors. They phone someone who speaks to members. And it's, you know, how would a member of the public necessarily know they are phoning a member that supports their ward when they go to the polls, they never elect members. They know that they are electing their councillors. So I just think there's an opportunity to think about how we rebrand that and really, I suppose, just reteach ourselves to start calling and referring to councillors and not members. Councillor Binny Lovett.
I really appreciate that, because sometimes you're going around the ward and people are, oh, you're the member of parliament.
Exactly.
Differentiate.
No, I think that's an excellent comment that has been made, and we are going to be undertaking a review of member services, which will follow after the current restructure and redesign of the Mayor and Cabinet Office. So that will be something that we can do at that point. So yes, thank you for that.
And thank you for bringing up that example, because I too have been the MP of Hackney many days and times as Deputy Mayor. But so I think as well, and the organisation, we're talking to ourselves using two different languages, and I just think it's unhelpful, isn't it?
No, I agree.
Okay. Other than that, I don't have any other comments. If we have no other comments, we'll go on to the final appendix 10, and back to you, Dawn, thank you.
So there is appendix 9.
Sorry,
Appendix 9.
apologies.
Apologies. So,
Apologies, everyone.
yeah, so appendix
19.
9, which is
In the
a supplementary in the supplementary papers, which is the terms of reference of council committees.
Apologies. In the
So-
main document,
Yes, yeah.
appendices, yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I know why I skipped it, because I'm in the main
The main
document
document,
where it
yes,
isn't
yeah,
in there. That's
Yeah,
right.
thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll speak to appendix 9, which is, as I said, the terms of reference for council committees. You know, as set out in the report, the Constitution Working Group has been developing a revised format for terms of reference of the various council committees, its boards, panels, etc. Currently, the terms of references do not have a standard approach in terms of how they are presented, but rather have reflected individual drafting styles as they have been established over time. This can lead to different information being presented between committees, etc., and information being lost within lengthy paragraphs or not being presented at all, leaving the reader to locate it within other parts of the Constitution. So what the Constitution Working Group wishes to see the committee's views on is the proposed new format before undertaking the task of making amendments to all the terms of reference. The document presented at Appendix 9 is therefore a sample of what we're proposing. Committees reminded that amendments to the actual remit of the council's various committees are not something which is within the authority of this committee. However, and the terms of references were last reviewed during 21-22. The committee should also note that where the council is not responsible for the administration of any committees, or where the body has themselves approved the format of their terms of reference, then those terms of reference will remain in the format that has been approved by that body or the authority which administers them. So in essence, what we're looking for committee views on today are the proposed new format, so that we can have consistency across the terms of references that we are responsible for.
And what I would say, as the Vice Chair of the Cabinet Procurement and Sourcing Committee, any comments that are mentioned for consideration here, I can always make sure that I feed that back to the Chair and the members that sit on that procurement.
And I'm not sure if Tessa would like to come in with any additional information around that. Tessa has been leading on this aspect of the work.
Thank you, Dawn. Not a great deal to add, but I'd like to focus the committee on the green headings. So as mentioned by Dawn, the Constitution is pretty much silent in a lot of its committees and subcommittees on the terms of reference of its committees. So we just want to have something in place that is appended to the Constitution and is easily accessible for officers, for councillors, for members of the public, in terms of what is a committee about, how the committee is run, and just general information. You know, can you ask a question and things like that. So it's just to focus yourselves onto the green headings and whether or not we need to be adding more to this. Do we need to take away from it? This was developed by benchmarking this draft against other local authorities and public organisations as well. So there are many more headings that can be added, but we don't want to make it too long either as well. So yeah, so we welcome your comments on this. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I haven't had the opportunity to consider this in detail, so I might have another look, but I do think it looks helpful in principle. I think it's, you know, it looks quite sensible. I think I sort of welcome the balance between sort of providing information but keeping it sort of succinct and accessible. So just a question really. There's obviously a difference between committees, which I think is what we're talking about here, and scrutiny, which we've decided to carry on commission. So is this just focusing on committees, because scrutiny is obviously separate?
Yeah, it's interesting. We when we met as officers on Monday, we did have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I believe that we were going to go back to have a conversation with Tracy. Because that would be a separate piece of work that would need to be completed in partnership with Tracy.
Yeah.
But currently, as it stands, it's in relation to the committees and not to scrutiny.
Yeah, because as I say, it's a clear distinction between
Definitely, yes, most definitely,
committees,
yes,
even
you're
if they do
absolutely
have
right.
backbenchers on them and
Yes, yeah.
and scrutiny.
Yeah.
So just it's quite
Yeah,
And I think that's why there was some discussion at the last meeting why we thought it might potentially be unhelpful to change the name, that the two different entities or groups meetings would have the same name but different functions.
yes, yeah.
Councillor Cunningham, yes.
Sorry, it's not actually to do with this, it's to do with this committee, the Constitution Committee. And I just wondered what the status of this committee was and whether there would be, you know, a re-election of members at annual council or a reappointment at annual council. Because we've got shelf life, haven't we? So I wondered whether
It would, yeah, so it operates along, you should, yeah, so, yes, yeah.
So we discussed this, didn't we?
We did, yes, yeah. So it will, the Constitution Committee will continue. Obviously, the frequency of meetings will differ for the next municipal year, because in the next municipal year, we won't be undertaking a full-scale review of the Constitution. However, you know, depending on legislative changes that need to be implemented, or any changes that I would need to make in accordance with Article 15, we may need to refer back to members of the Constitution Committee.
so is it an executive committee or is it a
So it's not an executive committee, no. However, the committee has been established so that in order to be able to have to take the views of members and your representative of your member colleagues across the board, with regards to the next municipal year, going forward until we have another major rescale review of the Constitution, it is viewed that we will continue with the committee. But as I said, there won't be as many meetings, and we will need to look at the work that the Constitution Committee needs to undertake. But I'm sure that there will be a number of things that we will need to do within the municipal year because of proposed legislative changes, and even just reports that will need to be prepared by myself as the monitoring officer. Yeah. Yeah.
can we pick up after the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Billy Lubbock?
I think it all looks good. I was looking at, you know, some of the text in here as a sort of sample. I don't know how much of that is going to be kind of pro forma for each of the committees. So in the last section about review, it doesn't say who the terms of reference are reviewed by.
Right, okay.
If that's
Yeah.
pro forma, then it might be helpful if that has some clarity. But otherwise, you know, I think it's very good.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
clear.
Yeah. So so you're absolutely right, because the terms of reference will be reviewed by each individual committee. So we can make that a bit clearer as well. Yeah.
I also had a sort of question about this committee in terms of what the timeline is now. I think this gets prepared and then we'll go to full council and we'll have another chance to sort of input before it goes there. And
That's right. And I think at that meeting, I would like us to be able to set a time in the diary, maybe in 6 months' time, to review and go back to focus groups after. You know, we're going to have the focus groups before it goes out to the public, but then I think maybe 6 months in, speak to them again, have them have a look at it, and then have a meeting, and then at that meeting we can then sort of do a mini forward plan in terms of the Constitution Committee. What would we like to review and when, and then also, as you rightly said, there will be ad hoc meetings depending on any legislation or adjustments that might need wider input from councillors. That are not just going to be what you would update as the monitoring officer.
No. Yeah. Yes, so we're still aiming to meet the July. I believe the next meeting will take place of the committee in May.
May the 23rd.
So at that meeting, it's proposed that we will have the full document insofar as it's ready.
What I would say, given that I'm sure my councillor colleagues will, some may echo this, I know for me, in the next 2-3 months, I already have no evening slots apart from a few Fridays, which is never very welcome for meetings. So my reflection is that we can't wait till May the 23rd to think about when that engagement piece is going to go happen, because those need to get into the diaries quite early, because I think we had said that, you know, as councillors, we won't be there for all of the drop-ins or engagements, but it might be really helpful that we have an idea of when they are, because I'm sure some of us, I'm sure if not all of us, would be quite eager and keen to observe some of those sessions with the general public when they're reviewing the work. But actually, if we wait till the 23rd of May to get anything in the diaries, I know for me personally, you know, already I'd have to reschedule to get them in. So can I suggest that all of the engagements and dates are circulated
as quickly
by email as soon as possible, and a variety of mornings, afternoon and evenings, and in that way, hopefully, you'll get councillor engagement, which I know that you're keen to have, Dawn, because you've mentioned that to me before. And then Councillor Gordon.
So I was trying to get clarity on that engagement piece, how much we're going to be engaged with. My understanding was that's sort of like the focus groups and that kind of thing. My understanding was that we wouldn't necessarily be involved in doing those focus groups, but would have input into the formats. Or would we need to be involved in them in some capacity?
I just think we need to know when they're going on. I don't think there's an issue if councillors observe that, but we can take that away and look at it. But I just think we need to. It's just important that we know when they are, and that they, you know, if there's a potential if people would want to observe that they're diarised. I think that if it comes in May, it's far too late to give anybody the option.
So just to come back on that, thank you, Chair and Councillor Binny Lubbert. The proposal is that we will have the focus groups with members of the public and other suggested groups that have been suggested earlier today and also in the last meeting. However, we have had the discussion, floated the idea that they will be chaired by Louise and myself. So Louise Humphreys, who is the head of legal and governance, and in attendance will also be colleagues from our consultation and engagement team, because they will shape the meetings and you know, that's what they do. I didn't see that there was anything wrong in members attending, so members of the committee attending those focus groups to be part of the discussion and to listen and to add any clarification as well. So that's why we will endeavour to ensure that the committee receives the dates of those proposed dates for those meetings.
Thank you, Dawn. And I suppose one of the reasons why I wanted us to be able to be part of that is that obviously some of the suggestions are what we have made as councillors. So we might want to hear firsthand that feedback and reflection. And I didn't see, as I said, I discussed it with Dawn, I didn't see that would be difficult or in any way that as councillors we couldn't be part of that.
Just with those dates, will we also get a sense of the format of the...
Oh yes. So what we will do is we will provide you with the list of questions that we will be seeking to explore with the attendees. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon.
So I did miss a lot of this discussion, but just asking whether it's going to be a mixture of sort of online and real life engagement.
So yes, we want it to be as accessible as it can be, those focus sessions. So there will be an offer for them to be online as well. Definitely, yes,
Petra.
Hi, thank you. I thought it might also be worth mentioning that the officer group has also discussed the idea of engaging staff members who will be key users of the Constitution, because when they are working through their streams of work and need guidance, they'll be looking to the Constitution for help as well. So we have already floated the idea amongst the officer working group about having some small, maybe lunchtime or small sessions with volunteer staff members to look at sections of the Constitution and make sure that it works as well for them.
Thank you, that's helpful, and I think that's a great idea that those that will be using it as part of their day job equally find it as accessible as possible as well. Any other comments or contributions on appendices 10? Okay. All right, so it's just for me then to ask colleagues to asset out that the committees, that we will agree as the committee to pose these recommendations to officers, that they will then consider all of those back in the officer working group that considers this. And obviously anything that can't be amended or accepted will then be clarified or explained to us as to why that cannot happen. Do councillors agree? Excellent. Any other business? I'm feeling very generous, although I haven't been notified. I'm happy to take them as we do have time on the agenda. I cannot see any indications of that, so I will look to seek to end the meeting. I want to thank officers for attendance and you as councillors for your input. I know that this doesn't seem like exciting, but I think it's an important piece of work, because what we are doing is making sure that we empower the general public to have access to what we do and us, and actually, in a way, hopefully we're facilitating them and empowering them to get what is important to them heard here at the town hall. So thank you for your time this morning. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just just under any other business, I propose to write to the committee about a change that I'm going to be making to the constitution. So I have formally written to Deputy Mayor Bramble, Deputy Mayor Nicholson, and also to the Mayor about the change. So once I receive confirmation from them that they are happy for me to go ahead and make that change, then I will formally write to all of the committee members to update you and to let you know what the change is. And it's in relation to the appointments committee and taking on board legislative changes that have recently come into place. Well, they came into place last year, but now that we've got a director of HR, Human Resources and Organisational Development, this is felt that it's the appropriate time to do so. But I will write to members and to provide you with an explanation for my reasons as to why I'm making the change, and also take any questions from yourselves as to why the change has been necessary at this point of time.
Thank you, Joel. And I think it's important to broaden it to the Constitution Committee, because ultimately these are the councillors that are doing the work. So it's really important that when things are updated, they are they are aware of that. Councillor, actually, can I, Tessa, did you want to come in on this point before I go to councillors in the room?
No.
I thought I heard a sound of someone online. So Councillor Binny Ludwig and then Councillor Gordon.
Following that, will that need to be approved by full council or anything, or will it just be
no, so I'll make the change. I will make the change in accordance with my powers under Article 15. So yes, it's not a substantial change, which should go to full. Which it could go to full council, but I think it's appropriate that I make the change now. Thank you.
And I think on legislation, my limited understanding as that because it's in statute in law, it will not need approval of councillors at full council.
Yes,
because we have to do it. We have to be as a council compliant around law. No pressure, because Councillor Gordon's a lawyer. So I'm going to pause there. Councillor Gordon.
I was going to ask the same question. So.
Thank you.
That is right, isn't it, Dawn?
That's correct. Thank you so much. Yes.
You and the officers in this directorate are rubbing off on me.
Yeah.
My limit answer. So on that note, I'm going to close the meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mario, you've got recording. Bye-bye to everybody online.
We're still live, actually.
Can you log back in? I don't know if we are still.
on channel 4? Please do not.
Let me just